Alright guys, so we're back now to finish up lesson 6.1. Hopefully that first video didn't bore you completely. I'm really sorry for all of that awkwardness. Again, it was my very first video, so hopefully from this point on they can be a little bit less weird and a little bit more at least educational at the very least. So let's go on into this lesson. And so we are on page 157. We are going and finishing up the your term questions and then moving on to the horizontal and vertical lines. And so for this part here it says, tell whether each equation is linear, and if so, graph the function represented by the equation. So as you can see here, number 5, it says y minus 3 equals 2x. And now if you recall from page 156, if you look in the middle there underneath where it said the standard form of a linear equation, you guys can see, let's go ahead and pull that up for you guys so you can see it. Oh, I don't have it right now with me. Actually, here we go. So right here, you guys can see that it says, notice that when a linear equation is written in standard form, the following is true. So x and y both have an exponent of 1. What that means is that you cannot have a second power, a third power, see an exponent of 1, which basically means that you don't have an exponent written down. The other thing is that x and y cannot be multiplied together, and that x and y cannot be denominators, exponents, or radicands. So basically now moving on into this one, it says that we have y minus 3 equals 2x. So you see here that y and x do not have an exponent attached to it. So going right there, we can know that at least this part is true. Now we don't see that they're being multiplied together, and we also don't see that they are part of a denominator because we don't have any fractions in this particular equation. So with that being said, we know already that this is going to form a straight line. So it will be a linear function. So we're going to go ahead and write that it is linear. Now with that being said, we're going to go ahead and now create an x and y table just to confirm. And you guys have done this before where you create values for x. So in this case, we're going to do 0, 1, and 2. Actually, let me go ahead and instead of 0, 1, and 2, let's go ahead and do negative 1 and 1. So that way we have 0, a negative 1, and a positive 1. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this negative 3. I'm going to move it over to that side of the equal sign by adding it. Okay, so we want to cancel it out from the left side. We want to bring it over to the right side, and we're going to go ahead and add it. So what this equation really is y equals 2x plus 3. So now I have 2x plus 3. I can go ahead and substitute these values into x and then solve for y. So if I substitute 0 for x, I now have 2 times 0 gives me 0, and 0 plus 3 is 3. 2 times negative 1 gives me negative 2, and negative 2 plus 3 gives us 1, and 1 times 2 is 2, and 2 plus 3 gives us 5. So now we can go ahead and plot these points on this graph just to confirm that our line is going to be linear. And so we have 0, positive 3, so we're going to go ahead and plot that point here. Negative 1 and positive 1, we're going to go right here. And then our last point is 1 and positive 5, so it's going to be right over here. So you see that that does form a straight line, so we can go ahead and put a line through our points and go ahead and add our arrows. Okay, so now the next one is y equals 2 over x. Now automatically you see that you have a fraction, and the denominator of that fraction is x. So right there, this is telling us that it is not linear. So we have here non-linear. And you don't have to go ahead and graph anything on here. Because, but it does say here, so if so, graph the function represented. So that's only if it was linear that we were graphing it. Okay, so moving on to page 158, you guys can see here that it's talking about horizontal and vertical lines. So it says, as stated earlier in the lesson, a linear equation is in standard form if it's in the form ax plus bx equals c, where a, b, and c are real numbers, and a and b are not both 0. So basically what that means is that a and b cannot equal 0 at the same time, but one of those values is allowed to be 0. So if you look at example A, you have that y equals 8. So right off the bat, you see that you're missing the x, and the reason for that is because it's 0x. So because you don't have a 0 or because, I'm sorry, because you don't have an x, we go ahead and we assume that it's just 0x, just so that it looks like an equation of a line that we're used to seeing, because usually we see x's and y's when we're talking about linear functions. And so because of that, we want to go ahead and just throw it in there just so that it looks more familiar. So now we have 0x plus 1y equals 8. We can go ahead now and substitute values for x and solve for y and go ahead and graph that line. So now whenever you have y equals a number, that means that no matter what value for x you have, the y is always going to be 8. So if you go ahead and substitute all of these values into x, you're multiplying by 0. So that basically means that it's going to be canceling out every single time no matter what number you substitute in there. So even if I were to substitute 1 million into x, I'm still going to have that y equals 8. And so that's what we have right here. So now you guys can see straight from this line that this is going to give you a horizontal line. So it says, notice that all ordered pairs have a y coordinate of 8. Okay, another way of remembering of what type of line this is going to give you, if y equals 8, that means that your line is going to be intercepting the y-axis at the positive 8. Okay, and using that same idea, you can see here that with x equals -1, you are crossing the x-axis at the -1 as seen here on this graph. Okay, so it's the same concept. You're going to go ahead and put a 0y into your equation, and any value that you substitute for y is always going to give you -1 as your x value. Okay, so it doesn't matter what value you substitute for y, your x is always going to equal -1 for this equation. Now, looking at this reflect question, it says, when the equation of a graph of a horizontal line is written in standard form, the coefficient of x must be 0. Explain why. When the equation of the graph of a horizontal line is written in standard form, the coefficient of x must be 0. So basically, we know that when you have standard form, you have ax plus by equals c. Now, you're talking about a horizontal line. A horizontal line we saw was when you have y equals a number. That number is going to be c. That's your constant. And so if y equals your constant or your c, then that means that you don't have an x value, and because of that reason your x is going to have a coefficient, in this case a, of 0. Okay, so let's go on into these zero-turn questions, and I'm going to go ahead and just for this sake I'm going to go and do number 8 and number 10. So here it says to tell whether each equation represents a horizontal line, vertical line, or neither. And then it says to graph the equation. So in this case, we see y equals 2x. We can see that we have an x value and we have a y value, but we don't have any missing variables. So because of that, we can go ahead and say that this is going to be a linear line, so it's not going to be horizontal and it's not going to be vertical. It is going to give us a regular diagonal line. So in this case, it's going to be neither. So it's asking us to go ahead and graph it. So we're going to go ahead and create just a small x and y table here off to the side, and let's go ahead and plug in some values. So we have -1, 0, and +1. If I substitute -1 into x, I have 2 times -1. That gives me -2. 0 times 2 gives me 0. And 1 times 2 gives me 2. So I can go ahead and plot those points. So I have -1 and -2, 0, 0, and then 1 and +2. And so right here, you can see that I have a regular diagonal line. So it's neither a horizontal line or a vertical line. And then for number 10, you have 3y equals -4. So again, you want to go ahead and try to have your y separate if you'd like. And by separate, I mean to have it by itself, similar to how number 8 was, like this by itself. So if we go ahead and divide both sides by 3, we have that y equals negative 4/3. And in this particular case, we don't have an x. There's not an x in this equation. In that case, so since we don't have an x, what that means is that we're going to have a horizontal line. And what a horizontal line is going to look like in this particular case, we said that if y equals a number, then that means that it's going to be crossing the y-axis at that number no matter what the x value is. So what that means is negative 4/3 is the same as having negative 1 1/3. So I'm going to come down here to negative 1, then I'm going to go down just a little bit more, and I'm going to go ahead and plot my point here. And I know that no matter what my x value is, it's always going to be down at the negative 1 1/3, which is the same as that negative 4/3. So I can go ahead and make my horizontal line just like that. So I want you guys to go ahead and do number 9 and 11 on your own. All right, let's go ahead and do some of the questions in the guided practice. This is on the next page, on page 160. So it says here to write a linear equation in the form ax plus by equals c for given values of a, b, and c. It tells us to then simplify the equation. And it says to tell whether the equation represents a horizontal line, a vertical line, or neither. So we're going to go ahead and start with our a, b, and c. So we have here, we have a 0x plus 3y equals 1. And so this x obviously cancels out, and we're left with 3y equals 1. If we divide both sides by 3, we have that y equals 1/3. And again, since we do not have an x value, this is a horizontal line. I want you guys to go ahead and finish 2 and 3 on your own. As well as number 4, you're putting in these x values into this equation that's given to you, solving for y, and graphing it. Okay, so for homework on lesson 6.1, I want you guys to complete this guided practice. And that completes this video, guys. I'm going to go ahead and do lesson 6.2 for you. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this, so I will see you guys in class. Have a good one.